so I've kind of gone from full XRP person to like more Bitcoin person literally over the past few months. But I've been in this since 2017. And it was when I saw XRP, I saw Bitcoin and I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, but I only heard about it because of Ethereum. I mean, I only started to actually look into Bitcoin because of Ethereum. I was like, oh, okay, like there's actually something happening here. Like from a topological perspective, there's not just Bitcoin as a thing to use money, whatever. There's like, there's a class of things that exist now. And so I was like, okay, so then let me understand what Bitcoin is. And then I was like, okay, well, if this is going to happen, this is going to completely mess everything up. But like the structures that are in place will have responses to something that's that powerful, right? And so when I saw XRP, which didn't take long, this was something that I was so confused by. I'm like, it's the third largest cryptocurrency by market cap. Like, how do you keep ignoring it and not trying to understand it to some degree? And I was like, oh, well, then this is probably that solution. This is that answer to if Bitcoin is going to take over and rewire the global financial system, then like this is probably the system's response to it. At least that's how it's being branded, right? And
No, I
yeah,
I
go ahead.
totally agree with that perspective. In fact, I've always been uh massively bullish on Bitcoin over the long run. I mean, I think I just look at them and categorize them slightly differently. Like I think Bitcoin has really solidifies itself as being like, and I don't want this to come across at all as negative, but like a pristine collectible in a very similar way to what gold has become. Um I just feel like for me, it's always been it hasn't necessarily answered the question for me of like financial infrastructure. And that's where I think XRP has a better or different road carved out for it than something like Bitcoin. But I don't think that detracts in any way from Bitcoin in its own right. So that's one of those things. I know a lot of people debate back and forth, but if Bitcoin's one day $1 million, which I think it one day will, I think XRP is going to have an astronomically higher price. And when XRP has an astronomically higher price, I think Bitcoin will as well. Like, I just think in the same exact way as like in the internet era, there were multiple companies all solving different problems that all had their own value proposition to the world. Like, I feel like it's going to be very similar with a lot of these cryptocurrency networks.
Yeah, I think a lot of the infighting occurs because a lot of people think that it's like this or that. When I think at least over the short term, it's probably and, right? So it'll be very interesting to see how that all plays out. But for you to attach yourself so strongly to one asset, what is your like bull thesis there where you're literally making your name like XRP nickel? That's a big stamp of approval. So like what led you to have that kind of conviction?
I would actually say it's sort of multi-part. So like for me, the real reason, like I said earlier, for XRP was just because it was the first thing that it filled a really important part of my portfolio, right? Like I was investing in a lot of these different tech companies that all had like really, really powerful innovations they were bringing to the world. But the one thing that like no one was really fixing that I thought was so outdated was like financial infrastructure. And it was like kind of one of those things I was like, okay, well, like Uber is completely transforming transportation. Like Tesla's doing this stuff to ride hailing. Then you have players like Palantir, like bringing AI to the world. And it's like, how can I still not move money on a weekend? Or like, why do I have to worry about like a bank holiday? Or like, why is this taking 3 to 4 days? And it's like, there's this, it's just so outdated and so broken. For me, it was like to fill that part of my portfolio, right? It's like, I wanted something that directly impacted like financial architecture. So I started doing a lot of content on XRP. And what I noticed was like there was a huge group of people who were also very interested with that type of content. Like a lot of people wanted to hear it. So from my own content perspective, I started focusing a lot on XRP because it was such an engaging, and it still is such an engaging place to be able to build content in. And I just always was super attracted to that ecosystem in particular. It just made a lot of sense for me to like sort of focus on that and give that my time and attention because a lot of these other ecosystems, they sort of already have someone sort of at the top or they already have a very established community. I saw a really interesting place to be able to help build that in the XRP ecosystem and a place I really believed in. And I don't know. It just always was kind of one of those things that came a lot more natural than me even like really trying to pursue it one way or the other.
I think one of the things, so I want to talk about Bitcoin maximalism for a second, because I think that one of the biggest things that the Bitcoin maximalist has against the concept of really anything that's not Bitcoin is, so you mentioned at the beginning, Mikkel, like this idea that Bitcoin doesn't answer the question of like integration into the financial system and improving the financial system basically as it stands, right? Like it makes it slower, it's more clunky, it's more expensive as it currently stands. But a lot of, and this is a problem with Bitcoin, I think in general, is like, okay, well, what is this for? Right? Is it for sending money? Is it for permissionless sending of money? And I think that becomes the argument that a Bitcoin maximalist is going to make, is that there is no alternative to having a system that cannot actually be stopped by some other party. So how do you respond to that piece? Like, how do you look at that in this equation?
Well, I go back to, and it's a great question. I go back to kind of like what my core belief of what the future is going to look like. Like up until very, very recently, right? Like the whole idea of a lot of the Bitcoin maximalist had to do with hyper Bitcoinization, in which there's going to be like a replacement of fiat currency with Bitcoin. And like the United States Federal Reserve was going to like fold over and everyone's going to be transacting in Bitcoin. And like I just always viewed those things as like hyper unrealistic, right? Like it just never seemed to me like that was at all the direction that we were going. And like back in 2014, Chris Larson did a demonstration of the XRP ledger, and the first thing that he was showing off was the XRP ledger having tokenized fiat dollars in it, right? Like JPY, USD, and this idea that like what's the change that's happening isn't a revolution necessarily in like economic structure, right? Like the Federal Reserve is still going to be printing money, the Treasury is still going to be issuing money. Like I didn't see those things changing within the next 30 years. Like maybe something happens way down the line, but personally, I don't think we're that close to it like a lot of the Bitcoin maximalists thought. And because of that, it always made sense to me that like as we continue to see, every single part of human society is going to be digitized in some way or another. And like, then I just had to really think between two outcomes, right? Are like governments going to fold over and say, hey, we're going to completely blow up the entire economy and just destroy our ability to print money and like the entire fabric of how human society works? Or are we just going to like upgrade our systems to be faster, more efficient, and utilize new technology? And for me, it's like, that's why they don't detract one way or the other. Like Bitcoin just, I don't think has the capacity in order to cause that change to happen. I believe it's going to be a pristine store of value, a great opt out of the system. But I totally disagree with the mentality that that means that the traditional system is going to fail. In fact, I think the traditional system is just going to be incorporated into a lot of these digital systems that are going to be built. And that's exactly where I think XRP plays a very important role.
And let's be real for a second. Do you think that in that world that you're describing, that XRP ends up being more valuable than Bitcoin?
You know, that's probably one of the hardest questions to answer. So I think it really plays out like this. In my maximum like bullish thesis for XRP, if XRP can really fill the role of being this extremely neutral, decentralized liquidity source, and we really see it as the de facto institutional chain for all kinds of finance, right? If that's just where people go in order to conduct transactions, trades, and it's just the most liquid marketplace for this type of activity, I do think there is a world where XRP goes past Bitcoin in terms of market capitalization. But in a world where cryptocurrency stays a bit more niche and like it's not the revolution that I think a lot of people thought, I still think Bitcoin and XRP appreciate a lot in value over the long run. But in the world where it's just the collectible value and not so much of the utility value and not so much of like, a complete transformation to the fabric of the financial system, then I think Bitcoin probably has a slight advantage in just being the first collectible, right? Like the first thing ever issued. You see this in every single time of collectible markets, like even Pokemon cards. Like you have this Pokemon card that's super valuable, but then they find like a new one that was actually the first issuance, and now like that's the most valuable. So like humans have this idea that like the oldest, most original, most unique thing stores a lot of value to it. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. I think that's just the way history and humans work. But I do think there's a like potential that if these systems elevate into more than that, then the utility and use case that XRP can bring as a neutral, decentralized liquidity source plugged into all this money can give it a value proposition that could usurp just that store of value in collectible market.
Did you just call Bitcoin a collectible?
I do think Bitcoin is going down the road of being a collectible. And it's store of value collectible. I look at them in a similar way, sort of. Just because the main function in which humans are collecting them is really because it's something rare. It's something that has a low chance of being debased. It's something that people are storing value in simply as a different form to hedge against debasement. So that's generally how I define that. Now, like I say, I think collectible is too much of like a slight at what Bitcoin is. But I don't know if there's like a great word to really describe like where humans put that, because like there's like, let's face it, there's collectibles that if you held over a period of time were probably the best performing assets to ever exist. It sounds like a silly word that people throw around. What I'm really pointing at is I don't think Bitcoin has this same level of symmetry with where the world is going in terms of financial architecture that XRP has, that I think opens up another use case for XRP.
Hey, you made it to the end of the clip. That means you're probably enjoying this. And if so, just know that you can catch us live every Tuesday and Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern. And if you want to see the full version of this episode, you can click the link in the description down below. Otherwise, YouTube thinks that you will enjoy this next.